Mentored by adversity is really a concept that Devon came up with. And once we talked about it, we really were excited about getting to this point in the podcast, giving us an opportunity to interview other folks and just have conversations with people that we know, people that we maybe have not met before, and trying to learn more about their personality, but more importantly, what they've been through in their life and the adversity that they've gone through and how they've learned, how they've grown as a leader through that adversity. So we've also talked about the fact that while we're trying our best to learn from each other and hopefully really share things with our audience that they're going to be able to learn from, like, we're learners, and we're hoping that as we go through this conversation with Shavi today, that, we're going to be able to learn something from him and be mentored ourselves through that process. So again, really excited about, this next series and seeing how it goes.
Right about now, you are listening to the Legacy and Leadership Podcast, a show where we discuss living as a leader worth following, leading others to do the same, and in doing so, leaving a legacy for future generations. My name is Jimmie Gonzalez Jr., a learning and development professional and leadership coach, sitting down with my co-host, Anthony Devon Watts Jr., an expert contact center leader that has effectively led and developed dynamic teams with high motivation. Together, we have over 30 years experience in the corporate game. Join us as we discuss our growth as leaders, share the lessons we've learned, and interview others to see how their leadership style was shaped as they were mentored by adversity.
I'd say a lot of decisions I made as an adult, I look back at sometimes like when I'm really like journaling, or like anytime our family has been like on the precipice of like a big decision, like there's this thing in me that goes back and I got notebooks written all about it, but where I go back and I'm like, does this affirm the 18-year-old version of Shab's courage? Like, does this give that kid who is willing enough to risk it all, don't let that kid outbrave you, bro. Like that kid was able to make that decision, look at all those coaches and say no, look at moms and pops for like, if you're going to say no, the least you could have done was have a better GPA. Like listen, bro, like what you going to do now? All right. I don't know if you noticed where your GPA is at, son, but so it's like, I had to constantly go back where I'm just thinking like, I cannot allow the bravest moment of my life to be 15 years ago, to be, that kid, as amazing and as courageous as it was. I got to move and continue to ride that momentum. And man, honor that kid who gave up his dream, honor the kid that gave up, that opportunity. So thanks for noticing, because I try to, man, especially those early couple years, because I started helping coach and stuff. I go to camps. I'm like, man, I'll bust some of y'all right now. Like, hold on.
Give me the pass, man.
Especially because at that point you still. I was 21 years old. I was like, I still feel all right, man. Like, maybe I could do ministry and walk on or something. Like I don't know. So there was always those things in my head. But man, I can't. Hopefully, one day, and I can really find the words to accurately communicate it. But I just knew that I knew that I knew. It was just one of those, maybe because it was fresh to me. I say it this way, I'm sorry if I'm rambling, but I always tell people like, having not grown up, and this is coming from a pastor, having not grown up in church was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because when I was experiencing those shifts and changes of heart that I was going through already at 17, 18 years old, it was honest for me. It was real. And it was so authentic and tangible that it was like, nah, like this isn't my upbringing trying to influence my thoughts or my decisions. This is what I believe I'm hearing and what I know in my heart. I got to be brave enough to move on this. Like, so it really felt like, oftentimes for me, now my kids are PKs, right? So now they're growing up in church without even having a chance. For me, it always felt like, man, the best thing that happened to me was that I didn't have to filter through all these other ideas of what my life had been molded to look like. And I was able to just go, I'm pretty sure my heart's telling me I got to do this, and then just follow it. So it was a big deal, man.
No, absolutely, man. Absolutely, man. Actually, so I've shared this in past, kind of past podcasts, but whenever I hear something that's profound that really like sticks with me, I gotta call it out like I do in music. Like that was a whole bar, and you just gave a
Mm-hmm.
bar about
Yeah.
being courageous and not letting, again, that kid from 15 years ago outcourage you, especially as a leader. Courage is one of the attributes that I think gets kind of the least amount of spotlight, because I think when you think about courage, in order for courage to exist, in a lot of respects, there has to also be a tangible fear. Absolutely. Right. There, you have to be able to overcome that. Right. And so, vulnerability and fear is not necessarily a attribute or a characteristic that we tend to call out as leaders that exist for us as leaders, but it absolutely exists. And more importantly, it's about how do you display courage then as a leader to overcome it, man. And you touched on it. So I'm definitely taking that one with me. I'm holding on to that one. For sure.
That was good. Yeah, we were just talking yesterday. This group of men that I get with every 2 weeks, and specifically talking about the courage piece and how your values, you should have values, and what are those values that you stick to, and that's kind of the line that you draw for yourself in your life, and those values really then start to drive your conviction and what convicts you to make the right choices. And then sometimes you're going to have these choices where, like, I know this is what my heart, the spirit is calling me to do, but I might be scared, right? There's still that fear there, but those convictions and those values behind that give me the courage that I need to make those choices to continue to move forward and hopefully do what I'm called to do, man. There was two things that I noticed too, listening to the two of you guys talk as well, that it's interesting that even though it was in different realms or different spaces, both of you still find yourself as leaders kind of at, in your early 20s, and how your upbringing led you to that point. And then, obviously how that has helped to nurture and make you the men that you are today, in your early 30s. But, and then the other thing I would say, Shavi, is that even though it may seem right that when you made that decision, you were giving up something that was so wonderful and so great. And I played football too. I wasn't lucky enough. I wasn't good enough to have that opportunity to have coaches coming after me and that type of stuff. But even as great as that opportunity or option may have been, God has something so much better for you. He has something so much better for you. And I'm sure as you look, back on the last 10 years or so of your life, you've realized that all that glory, whatever comes from that, it just doesn't match the glory of doing God's business, and glorifying Him through that process.
So what was a moment that you knew or you felt that leadership was your calling and kind of part of your purpose and what you bring to the world?
So I'm going to get geeky on y'all first.
We like geeky too, yeah.
I was going to say, we're always game.
So I think when people, there's almost like this misconception about leadership, right? It's people thinking that leadership means you're like the hero or like you're the front face center person. And so think of it as Batman, right? People always think Batman is like the leader, the hero, right? But really, and if you learn about like story branding, like in marketing, you actually learn who the guide is. And that guide was Alfred. Not Robin, it was Alfred. And Alfred was the one that was like the true leader, the one that was like mentoring Batman, keeping him like his mentality and his like mindset well, pushed him where he needed to be pushed, say the right things to really guide him to his purpose. And so that's the way I look at leadership, is like whether in it, I would say early on, right? It always goes back to your childhood. And for me, it was middle school. So I was always heavily involved in like dance team, cheerleading, school organizations. And anytime I was involved in anything, I wasn't necessarily the captain, but I was always, whoever the captain was, like the right-hand man. And so I was always the one to be like, okay, so what is it going to take to influence the captain? And then what is it going to take so that whatever the captain wants to do, I can make sure everyone else has the buy-in. And so that's where I think very early on, I kind of knew, and maybe that's a Libra in me because we're the balance scale. And so I can always see the both sides of the spectrum. And so for me, it was always a really neat way of like, okay, I see their agenda. How do I get that to like come together? And so that is where my leadership kind of took place, is that as I grew older and older and actually started working in, professional settings, I quickly realized that I can learn so much from the captain, but I can also influence the captain a lot. And that in itself is leadership.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't always have to be vertical.
Mm-hmm.
You can definitely lead horizontally.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my moment for me.
No, there's a lot of great nuggets in there. I'll let you go ahead and touch on it, Jimmie, before I share my thoughts.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, we've talked about that, right? It's not about the title necessarily or the position that you hold. It is about the influence. It is about those individuals that you were a support to. You had to be able to build trust. And I think, within Devon and myself in our relationship, there was a time where he reported to me back in the day, and then within the recent years, really, I reported to him. And while I was a leader of my team and doing things within the call center that we worked in, I did my best between Devon and our other boss that had moved on to try to be that support, right? And how can I help influence and help with their initiatives and the things that they're trying to do? So leadership comes in all different roles and positions, but I appreciate that analogy too about Alfred and Batman. That's a good one.
Yeah, for sure. I was actually thinking, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna steal that. That's gonna get told to somebody.
But check this. Check how this works. So the viewers will be able to see from this camera I have behind me. If you know me, you know that my favorite superheroes are Superman and Wolverine. But I could not help but buy this at the checkout.
A Batmobile.
Yes, at one of the pharmacy stores the other day. So shout out. Yes, exactly. Shout out to Batman.
Absolutely, shout out Batman. But I love that because I think it really puts in perspective an easy way to understand the importance of influence, right? And like you kind of framed it, Day. I think going into it, especially early on as leaders, you kind of think, okay, I'm going to be the hero, the one that affects change. I'm going to be the Dark Knight. I'm going to be the guy that was born in darkness, right? All that stuff. And then when you really get into it, you realize that the real power is in the ability to influence, to shape, the mold, to inspire, to develop, to encourage, to watch people grow and go off and do some greater things. And so I can see how after years of experience and leadership, being able to look at these traditional hero stories and have that new lens on it to say, well, who is the real leader in Batman, right? Well, it was Alfred the entire time. And, Alfred was, like you said, that voice of reason, that person that's pushing him, guiding him, coaching him up, framing his worldview, right? So that he can go out and be the best Batman or superhero that he can be. And so I love that. I think, Jimmie, you and I have always kind of talked about the importance of, as a every king needs counsel and stuff like that, right? And just hearing her kind of share that story, I'm reminded of well, where does the seat of power really lie in the kingdom, right? And it's usually the king's hand more so than the king. The person that has the ear of the king is really the most powerful individual in the kingdom. And so I think that that just kind of doubles down on some of the themes that we've been sharing and makes it really easy for people to digest. But I love that. So like I said, I'm definitely that one's getting taken and it's going to be shared.
Yes.
Because actually today when we brought folks back, the first 30 minutes or so were touching on different leadership pillars. So I was able to kind of talk to them about employee engagement and culture and organizational behavior and developing your team and just kind of the mindset of a leader, right? To kind of set the stage for the other things that they're going to learn. And so I harped on quite a bit about influence, but I think being able to tie that story into it will really help drive it home for folks. So I really appreciate that.
I appreciate that, Jimmie. And yes, you mentioned the book and the journey itself with Rise, man. It's just phenomenal. It's opened us up to, opened me up to people that I put on my list. So I'm a very goal oriented person, man. And so I write down my goals and I like, okay. And I break it down. Like if there's people I want to meet, I'll put it down. And I'm not a starstruck type of person. So usually on my list is not the Beyonce's or the entertainers like that. I'm usually, I like people that have come from nothing, and not that the entertainers don't, but I love business people, like, because it's a whole different world.
Mindset.
It's a whole different mindset, right? When you have to take this intellect and try to build something from it, and not necessarily just entrepreneurs, but people who have taken that their expertise and their intellect and either climbed the ladder in the corporate world or built something. And so, Les Brown was one of those people that I had on my list, man. And this goes to show the power of writing down your goals. He was always somebody that, I hit a dark point at one time, and I got into Les Brown and would listen to, I listened to some spiritual things, and then I would listen to him from a motivational perspective. And I put it out, I said, man, one day I want to meet Les. And I remember we were coming off, we had hosted an event, and as a result of a lot of things going on at the time, the event didn't go as well, and it kind of put me in the hole. And I was in this I was just in this negative state. And I'll never forget, man, I got this phone call, and it was like a Las Vegas number. And I didn't answer because I was like, who is this calling me? You kind of screen your calls nowadays, right? And so I remember listening to I listened to the voicemail, like, okay, well, who is this? And it was Les Brown calling me, right? And he was calling me and left this motivational message. So somebody had told him about the work that we were doing with Rise and those type of things. And so here, this person that I had on my list of goals. And so my point is that, that list of goals, man, is so important, because you don't even know how these things will manifest if you just put it down and say, this is what I want to achieve. These are the places I want to go. These are the people that I want to meet, right? And I'll tell you, everybody that's been on my list of goals that I wanted to meet, it has manifested. And so goals are important.
Oh, that's awesome. So that was episode 17. It was all goal setting. So you just broke down some of the key points that we gave. It's how powerful it is to not just think about the things that you want to accomplish, but actually write them down. And again, how powerful it is how when you do that and you're looking at it, you're reading it, and you're putting plans together, how it just manifests itself. That work.
Yeah, man, you got to set that sail. I always say, man, it's like, our mind can be like this sailboat that's out on the water, man. And if you don't set the sail to where you want to go, man, you'll just blow all over the place, man. And so you just, that goal setting is basically like setting the sail.
Rage on that beat, going crazy.
You have just listened to the Legacy and Leadership Podcast, hosted by Jimmie Gonzalez and Devon Watts. Thank you, and we hope that you live, lead, and leave a legacy worth remembering. Until next time.